Does Tshwane have a mayor? In fact, you'll know, of course, Dr. Murunwa Makwarela was elected the executive mayor recently, and there was a question about whether or not he was entitled or at least eligible to be one, because at some point he was an insolvent. He was declared he was sequestrated essentially, and now questions have been raised about the authenticity of the document he submitted to prove that his finances are in order. The DA in Gauteng says they're going to investigate the authenticity of that statement. We're joined now by the FF Plus Chief Whip in the city of Tshwane, Dr. Kone Mulder. Thank you very much for your time. You are one of those, of course, who has raised questions about the certificate that was produced by Makwarela.
Yes, good morning. That's indeed the case. There's no doubt about the fact that we all know, and that is accepted, that Dr. Makwarela was sequestrated in 2016. Now, in terms of the provisions in the Constitution, he cannot be elected as a public representative as long as you are sequestrated. You need to be rehabilitated. That's where the question now comes in. There's huge controversy, and then, as you correctly point out, Dr. Makwarela now claims that he has been rehabilitated, and he gave some document to the municipal manager yesterday morning, and then he was reinstated to be the mayor because the municipal manager accepted that document. But we are of a view that there are huge problems and questions with regard to the so-called documentation, as well as other evidence that indicates the opposite. As far as I can ascertain, there has been no rehabilitation at all.
Well, hang on. I mean, the city manager, Johan Metler, in fact, the IEC has accepted that certificate. If they can, why can't you?
Yeah, well, the IEC acts on the instruction of the municipal manager, who informed them that as far as he's concerned, the proof has been given. So they will just react in that instance. So I think what happened was that the one-page document that was given to the municipal manager alleged to be a court order. At first glance, it really looks like a court order. But if you know where to look and you know how to go about these things, it becomes clear that there's a problem. And then subsequent to the court order, I've had some investigation done, and other evidence came to the fore which indicates that there's a problem. Let me give you an example, despite of the so-called court order. The trustee in this case that deals with this specific estate, I've got I received a letter from this person dated yesterday that indicates that there's no knowledge of any sequestration application launched. As a matter of fact, the trustee busy with this estate indicates that the process has not been concluded, and most likely it won't be so until July of this year at the earliest.
Just explain that. I got lost there in that detail. Just explain it again.
Yeah, let me try to explain. In order for the sequestration to be cancelled, if I can put it that way, by a rehabilitation process, the whole process in terms of the Insolvency Act to have yourself rehabilitated needs to be completed. There's a long process that you have to go through with ads in the government gazette and an opportunity for creditors to set their claims. And then an account being drafted, and that has been advertised. There's a long process, and right at the end of that process, the trustee in that estate then writes a report that says, I've done everything that needs to be done in terms of the Act. That report is then sent to the office of the Master of the Supreme Court, of the High Court. The Master then drafts another report. Both those reports go to the court and are on part of the application. Now, I've got written confirmation from the trustee in this instance that works for this specific estate, indicating no such report is being drafted, so it's not possible that there could be a rehabilitation. Why is there no such a report drafted? Because the process, according to the trustee, has not been completed, so it's impossible. The second thing that clearly shouts out huge problem, there was an attorney called James Ndebele, and that attorney was contacted urgently 2 days ago. And that attorney was then with a lawyer having instructions from Dr. Makwarela to try and bring an urgent rehabilitation application. It doesn't exist. You can't bring an urgent rehabilitation application at this stage. You have to go through the normal process and bring an application in terms of everything has been completed. So that mandate was terminated. I guess it was terminated when it was told to Dr. Makwarela, you can't do that. It doesn't exist. In any case, even if we do it now, which is not possible, it's irrelevant because he should have been rehabilitated before the election in November of 2021, which clearly didn't happen. Then, by coincidence, some miracle happened, and overnight, an alleged court order is found of an alleged application that was done in 2018. The problem with that even further is we don't find any record in the Government Gazette of any advertisements dealing with that alleged court application in 2018. What we do find, we find advertisements in 2019, we find advertisements in 2022 dealing with the estate of Dr. Mayoral, which is typical what happens when you then place an ad there to invite creditors to lodge their claims, etc. That cannot happen if the rehabilitation allegedly has been completed already a year ago. So there's a lot of things that doesn't make sense. And if you look at the so-called court order,
it's from the North Court of South Africa. Where's that?
The North Court. No, I don't know where that is. There's no North Court in South Africa. There should be a case number on there. There is a case number, but it's the wrong case number because the case number on the alleged court order refers to the sequestration application in 2016. This should have a new court case number because it's supposed to be a new case, such application. So that doesn't make sense.
So here's what we understand from the Tshwane, from the city of Tshwane, that their legal obligation is to reinstate the mayor based on the fact that he's complied with a request to provide verification of his rehabilitation. In other words, it's not Johan Metler's job to investigate that particular document. His job is just to receive it and say, there's his proof.
Correct. Exactly. That's exactly what happened. So he said, I need some proof. The person, Dr. Mayoral, then provided proof, according to him, which looks and is supposed to be and creates the impression this is a legitimate court order. And then the city manager acted in that respect, and I understand that. But from our perspective now, so we did some homework on our own, and it's quite clear that there's something very wrong with this alleged court order or the alleged claim that has been made. So what will happen now is that we will bring that evidence to the municipal manager, and then he'll have to take a new decision and see what he does with that. And that will take the process further. But there's also other ways to do that. There's a process where you can go to the registrar of the specific division of the High Court, and they can very quickly verify, is this a legitimate court order of this court or is this something else?
So here's the question. Mayoral was part of the coalition administration before the changes that have occurred in recent weeks. When he was part of that administration, some of the people that are pointing fingers at him now were perfectly fine, or at least weren't aware, let me give them the benefit of the doubt, that he had been sequestrated. I'm beginning to wonder how many other councillors all across the length and breadth of this land are in the same situation. I mean, shouldn't this be part of the vetting process before people can become members of councils?
Absolutely. The process is this. You're absolutely correct. I can assure you that within the multi-party coalition, we didn't have any inclination that this is the situation with a specific individual. What happens is when you go into the election, people make themselves available to stand as a candidate. The first hurdle is that specific party should have its own internal vetting process. I know the party that I belong to does have this. And to go through all of it, we look if you've got any criminal record or anything of that kind. So that starts with a political party. Then maybe it's a mistake. That person then applies to be a candidate. If the IEC then accepts the candidacy, maybe there's a huge problem there. That should be checked from the IEC's perspective. So in this specific instance, we were not aware of any problems for this individual. They've got one councillor, Cope, in the council. We accepted that. Here comes a man. He calls himself Dr. Mayoral. And Cope was satisfied with their councillor, and that was how we operated. Later on, about 2 weeks ago, it became clear that there's a huge problem, and then we started to investigate, and we had a look, and we found the sequestration. Then obviously it led to the next where we are now.
All right, Dr. Corne Mulder.
There are other examples.
We'll have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Thank you so much for your time. Dr. Corne Mulder is the FF Plus Chief Whip in the city of Tshwane. And I think it's a real question to ask about how many other councillors. What about at provincial legislature level? Goodness me, what about in Parliament?
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions.
Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.